talk to you today about Photoshop. We'll do a whole bunch of stuff with Photoshop. So I'm going to start with fashion colors. See? Okay. Is there a problem?
I've been trying for like 20 minutes now to print my memo for this assignment.
This simple memo you can't print?
And my style sheets.
And your style sheets.
Because for whatever reason my logon will not connect to printers now.
I can't really stay after class today, and I wasn't actually planning on coming in tomorrow. I don't have any particular reason to be here, no meetings or anything. So I'm going to give you the benefit. I'm going to be merciful. All right? If it's in my mailbox when I get here Monday morning, it'll be okay.
Okay.
All right?
Like I have the design.
Okay. All right. Just keep breathing. It's very stressful. I mean, when you have to rely on this technology, you know how stressful this whole thing can be. So a little bit about fashion colors. There really is a small group of people who control how we dress. They control the color of our towels and our pillowcases. This group of people is it's called the Fashion Institute, and every year they come up with the main colors that are going to be available 2 years from now. So they're now working on the colors that you'll be wearing in the fall of 2017. And the reason for the long lead time is because this information has to go out to manufacturers all over the world, and it has to go out to chemical engineers, because who else is going to mix up the dyes and the paints and the stains? All right? The very first semester that I taught this class, I had a number of students from the Wisconsin engineer, including a chemical engineer, a woman who was in charge of the graphic design department who knew nothing about graphic design. But she must have been good at something because she got hired by Clairol to design their lipsticks. Lipstick is, it's a wax, and it has to carry pigment, and it has to dry out, but it can't be too dry. It has to maintain a shiny finish. It has to last for 100 kisses or something like that. And the amazing thing was, this is a young woman who never wore makeup. But that's the job she got, designing lipsticks for Clairol. There you go. So this is what you would have seen in spring 2006. And here we are in 2007. And there's a blow-up of one of the colors, chili pepper, very popular color that year. I love that color so much that whenever I see it around, I still buy it. All right, 2007. And you'll notice that the spring colors tend to be more pastels, light colors, the kind of thing that people wear in the summertime, in the springtime. Right? I would be willing to bet that somebody here got a sweater or a shirt that color and took it back to the store immediately. I don't know why they keep trying to sell people that yellow-green color. People hate that color. If you go at the end of the year sale, you'll see racks full of that stuff on it. But they keep bringing it out. All right, so here we are in spring 2008. We've got a snorkel blue. This is later they're going to call the same color, they're going to call it blue iris. It's almost exactly the same color. But look at the red up there. It's a rosy red. 2010. All right, and look at the names they give them. Here's that color again, Woodbine. In fact, they're going to try to get people to buy it twice now. They got a light version and a dark version. I call it snot. Okay, what can I say? But these are the colors that people were wearing in 2010. Here's 2011. I didn't get the names on those. 2012, I've got the names on them. All right, and look what's back again. All right, they gave up on the green. They went over to more of a khaki color. It was very popular that year. Hey, this margarita thing, this was not quite as ugly. It doesn't have as much yellow in it. And this became super popular that summer. A lot of people were wearing that. Watch what's going to happen to the orange. Pay attention to what's going to happen to the orange here, because this is kind of interesting. 2013, you got poppy red, which is an orangey red, and nectarine. And they're bringing back orange. How many of you like to wear orange? Nobody, do you really? Blaze orange. But, I mean, if I offered you an orange dress shirt, would you wear it? You might, okay. Most people don't care for that color very much. And yet it keeps popping up all over the place. Look over here. There it is. Boom. 2013, 2014. Look what's here. Celosia orange. Okay? And here's that same blue now. Now they call it dazzling blue. But it's almost exactly the same color blue. 2014. All right? Now we've taken the blue and we've made it a little more gray, and we call it bright cobalt. Right? Now there's no real orange here anymore. Orange is gone. You're wearing orange in 2014, you are out. Passé. Right? 2015. Oh gee, look what's coming back. Tangerine. So they wait until all the fashion people take their stuff over to St. Vincent, right? And then they bring back the color. So there we are in 2015 in the springtime. Did any of you get a shirt? And then, well, you know what? My colors up here are so much sharper and brighter than they are here. Let's see which this one is. This one. When did I get this one? I got this one last spring, but maybe it was a fall. Yeah, this is what the bright cobalt color is supposed to look like. Okay, because I got this after the sales were over last year. All right, 2015. This is what you're wearing now. Who knew? Okay, you laugh, but you know what? This stuff is going to show up in your under your Christmas tree, whether you like it or not. Because your grandma's going to take a look and she's going, oh, cadmium orange, she's got to have one of those, right? So you're going to wind up, here's your oranges back again. Isn't that nice? I'm absolutely thrilled with this palette. I'll tell you why. My granddaughter, the fashion expert in my family, told me that I look really good in neutral colors and greens. And look what I got up here. Look at that. I got 4 of them, maybe 5 of them, that are going to look gorgeous on me. Isn't that great? So there you go. All right, so these are the top colors for 2016. This is what you'll all be wearing next spring, I'm sure. Look what's back. Another orange. They got another orange up there. The blue is going to be darker than it was, and what they're going to do is they're going to pair the light blue with the dark blue together. Look at that buttercup color. Isn't that something? I don't know if I would, and nobody's going to wear this. Only maybe teenagers who don't know any better will wear that. All right, so this is the color of the year. I'm sure you're all fascinated by the idea that there was a color of the year. You didn't even know this, but look at how many bar bets you could win now. No, wait, please don't go to bars. But if you did go to bars and you placed bets, just by knowing that in 2008 it was blue iris, mimosa, turquoise in 2010, honeysuckle in 2011, tangerine tango in 2012, and I'll bet a lot of people got confused and didn't know what year it was. 2013, okay, you'll if you were here yesterday, you saw me wearing a shirt from 2013. This is Radiant Orchid, this is Marsala, and this is what I've been told is going to be the hot color in 2016. It's called gold ochre or golden ochre. They don't even seem to know the name yet. So run right out and buy a whole bunch of gold-colored shirts. You'll fit right in. All right? And this is an answer to another question that somebody had asked about the official colors of the UW. Wisconsin red is Pantone 200. Wisconsin gold is Pantone 873. And Wisconsin black is Pantone black. Used at, you see over here, how they spec it out? 100K, 100%. That's how they do it. Okay, so those are your fashion colors, folks. Run right out and save the American economy. We need your help. We can't do it alone. Photoshop. Okay. I start with these things? Ta-da! Photoshop. Here it goes. Okay. Did I do this one for you already? Did I talk to you? Did I introduce you to Photoshop? I think I just pulled it up and let you start playing with it, right? Okay. So I'll try to give you a little bit more information about working with it, where it comes from, why it does the way what it does. Okay. So there are different kinds of illustrations, as you know. Bitmapped images, you have dots, and the more dots you have, the sharper the image can be. And sharpness is determined by the contrast between the dots. You take a very dark dot, you put it next to a very light dot, you've got a sharp edge. That's going to be very clear. If they're very, very close together in color, it's going to be a blurry edge. So dots are really good for images that you want to look like the real world, because in the real world, hardly anything has a real sharp edge to it. Most things are slightly blurry in one way or another. And they're smooth, okay? Or they're organic shapes that we see in nature. Line art is what we call vector art, and which means that it's composed of lines, and these are all determined by mathematical formulas, straight lines, curves. It's the radius of the curve, the coordinates of where the curve starts, or where the center of the curve is. All of that stuff is determined mathematically, and that's vector art. And you saw that a little bit when I showed you how to work with the changing text to vectors in InDesign. This is the primary tool that you'll be using in InDesign, and this is the way that Illustrator works. Illustrator is vector art. All right, it makes a difference in the way you handle it. Continuous tone that's the definition that we use when we have many shades of gray, and you can have hundreds of different shades of gray. The more shades of gray you have, the more sensitive the image is, the more your people are able to see detail and get more information out of it. When you print in black and white, it's called a halftone. When you print in color, it's called CMYK, or RGB. Now, the thing is that when you open up the shutter on a camera and you let light in, whether it's hitting a piece of film or whether it's hitting a sensor, you're collecting information. Because on that sensor, on that film, there are things that are sensitive to different kinds of light. If it's black and white film, it's simply sensitive to the degree of darkness or lightness. If it's color film, it's going to come up with a formula. It can be RGB, it can be CYMK, it could be any kind. There are many different formulas, but a formula that specifies what color goes in that particular space. And what your camera is capable of doing is collecting an enormous amount of information when you think about it. Each picture that you take has millions of these little dots, and each of these little dots has a lot of information about what color goes there. And this is really a good thing, because what it means is that if the picture doesn't look exactly the way you want, you can tell the computer, take all the dots that look a certain way and make them look slightly different. Make them darker or make them lighter. Or increase the contrast between the dots that are this color or in this range of colors from the dots that are next to them. And that will increase sharpness. And that's what we're doing with Photoshop. That's exactly what we're doing. All right? So bitmapped images, you'll find it with clip art. When you do a screen capture, anytime you do a screen capture, you're capturing the dots that are on the screen. It's just plain dots. I took a picture of a ketchup bottle from a website, I enlarged it, and look what happens. It gets all pixelated. Because there's no way of enlarging. When you're using the vector formula, it's a math formula. You change the variables and you can change the shape, right? If you try to do that with bitmapping, it doesn't work. Digital cameras and scanned images are all going to give you the same thing, and that means that if you're going to enlarge them or reduce them, you're going to have to change the way the information is handled. And that's what Photoshop does really, really well. Vector images, you'll find some clip art. This is some junk that I took from PowerPoint. It's Microsoft clip art. You've seen the Office clip art, right? This is considered line art, although it's got some shadings in it. And I could make this thing, as big as this room, and it would still be okay. because it's just a vector drawing. You're not going to lose any sharpness. And that's why it works so well in PowerPoint, because I can shrink it down and stick it in the corner of the screen. I can fill up the screen with it. You can enlarge or reduce this without losing quality because it's just changing mathematical formula. If you'd like to find some different kinds of clip art, here's a website you can go to. There's one called gograph.com and one called graphsearch.com. And they'll give you some clip art if you want to play around with it. Don't overdo it with the clip art. When Microsoft Windows first introduced clip art to us, they gave us these little stick figures called string beanies. You remember seeing these when you were a kid, maybe? They were little black and white images of, it was basically a bean-shaped body on two little stick legs, and they were doing annoying things. And everybody used them in all their PowerPoint, and they almost took over the world. Really, it came very close to losing everything we had gained in the past 2,000 years. All right. So line art, you're familiar with line art. I showed you some examples. Remember I showed you examples of the cuts, the line cuts that were used for illustrations in the 19th century. And you can see it's composed of lines. And this is the kind of thing that you can enlarge and shrink and you won't lose any detail. Well, you will lose some detail as you get larger because the thickness and thinness of the lines is what's going to make the difference. But line art traditionally has no shades of gray. It's either black or it's white. And it uses, you can use little dots or lines to create grays. Do you know the term anti-aliasing? You know, have you heard that expression? Do you know what it means?
No, it reduces jagged edges.
Yeah, it's a way of reducing the jagged. What you do is you tell the computer to look at any place where there's a lot of contrast between one color and the next one that's next to it, and interpolate an intermediate color in between that. So that's called anti-aliasing. All right? Does anybody know who this fellow is? No? That's the first dean of the College of Engineering at UW-Madison. His name was Johnson. All right. So, black and white photos, what they did when they invented black and white photography was they discovered that silver tarnishes. Well, they knew that for a long time. Everybody who had a piece of silver knew that it would tarnish over time. One of the factors, it's not the only factor, but one of the factors that causes silver to tarnish is exposure to light. And for many, many hundreds of years, people wondered what would happen if we had some way of taking a sheet of silver and shining some kind of light on it in such a way that it formed a pattern. And it worked. It actually worked. There was something called the camera oscura that was invented during medieval times, in which they'd have a special room in the house with a pinhole in one wall. And if there was bright sunlight outside, the pinhole would act as a lens, and an image would appear on the opposite wall. It was a wonder of the age, let me tell you. But inevitably, someone in Italy, it could have been Leonardo, it could have been one of the other brilliant Italians during the Renaissance, took a thin sheet of silver and taped it up to the wall with Scotch tape. Okay, you know Scotch tape. That was a test to see if you knew that Scotch tape was invented in medieval Florence. Okay. They put a sheet of thin silver up on the wall, and son of a gun, when the light came in and it hit it, the parts that had got more light turned black, and the parts that got less light stayed very, very light. And people thought, oh, this is so wonderful. Of course, everything was backwards, right? And upside down, because that's what happens when you hold up a lens, right? What happened in the 1830s was that working independently in France and England, a number of inventors came up with a way of taking silver salts, dissolving them in solution, putting them on a sheet of glass, exposing the glass through some kind of a lens, and then saving the image on the glass. And that really made all the difference in the world. The first photos were taken about 1837, 1838. That's how far back photography goes. All right? So this is the way the printers do it. In the print shop, they use a whole bunch of dots. And the grayscale halftone that we use in most newspapers, magazines, 26 different levels of gray, and you get a pretty good look. If you were to take that image in a newspaper and hold up a magnifying glass, you would see a pattern of dots. And you can see it here. And you'll notice that the dots are not all the same shape. The dots are different shapes and different sizes. And the way these things are described is by the percentage of the image that's covered with black. So if you've got a shaded image that's covered with 300 dots per inch, okay, that would be one measurement. These are the examples of dot size in various things. Newspaper, 65 to 85 dots per inch. Your computer screen, I think is it the Apples that are 72 and the Windows that are 96, or do I have them backwards? I forget which one is which. But that's pretty low resolution. It really is. Magazines, a good quality magazine will have 120 to 200, and most quality printing today is at least 300. It's become very easy. When you've got 300 dots per inch, you can have very fine lines, and you can have very small dots, which means you can get very clear, sharp, brilliant-looking images. If you buy yourselves an art book or a fancy calendar, it'll have between 600 and 1,200 dots per inch. I bought a scanner because I was doing a lot of photographs, and the scanner can do 19,000 dots per inch. And the reason that I did that was because when my mother-in-law died at the age of 98 a few years ago, my wife inherited 10,000 photographs and negatives, some dating back to the Civil War period. And her first reaction was, you know what she's going to say, right? Oh, Stephen, why don't we scan these? This is how I learned to use Photoshop. Okay? I can do this stuff in my sleep now. Yeah. There you go. All right, so your digital camera, it's going to change the number of black pixels, and it's a percentage, of the area that's covered. So we've got 25, and one of them is black. So 1/25th, whatever that percentage would be, 2/25ths, 3/25ths. And the percentages determine how dark the image is going to be. And a halftone, what they do is they change the size of the dots, not the number of dots, but the size of the dots. Now, because you're printing on paper, you all know how paper is made, right? You take a tree, you chew it up, and then you flatten it out. I used to ask the class, how many of you made spitballs when you were in middle school? But that was too embarrassing. Nobody wanted to admit that. Of course you made spitballs. Everybody at some point or other took a piece of paper and chewed it up to see what would happen. I remember in college, we were all teething. This is one of the things I had forgotten about being 17, 18 years old. Your last bunch of molars comes in. So you got all these big guys walking around either sucking on their finger, right? Or chewing on a Kleenex or something. Do you remember this? No? Maybe kids don't do this anymore. But you didn't teeth? You didn't get any wisdom teeth? That would explain a lot. All right. In any event, making paper is the same as making spitballs. You take a tree and you add a whole bunch of chemicals to it that break it down into fibers. You spread the fibers very, very thinly and very smoothly, and then you crush them between heavy rollers to make it nice and smooth. But it's still nothing but a sheet of fibers, tree fibers. What do the fibers do in the tree? Do you know? You know how trees work? No? They do work. They work very hard. They carry nutrients up from the soil, all the way up the trunk of the tree, all the way out the branches, all the way out to the leaves. And then they collect sunlight, chlorophyll, right? Convert that into usable sugars, and that goes back down. So actually, all the parts of the tree are designed to deliver fluids from in the ground 200 feet up in the air. They're tubes. That's what they are. These fibers are tubes. So what happens when you put a drop of ink on one of these things? Yeah, it's going to splush. And there's an actual name for this. And if you want to see a printer start to tear out his or her hair, ask them, how's the dot gain? It's called dot gain. Ask them, how's the dot gain? And they'll tell you. All right? So, working with photos. Your goal is a sharp, clear, accurate picture. And you want the color to be as close to real life as possible. If you're going to be artsy about it, that's great. But even the people I know who do artsy photographs like to start out with reality because that gives them something to measure against. And all of these tools are designed to do that. The more stuff you can do in the camera with the camera, the better, because Photoshop is really tricky. And so that's why I gave you that whole talk about using the white balance and using the exposure setting and using the rule of thirds in the camera, because the less you have to do in Photoshop, the better. All right? The film camera, it makes a negative. When the light hits that silver stuff or whatever the dyes are, it creates a negative, and then that's used to make a positive. And it's still used today. Plenty of people use film cameras. Some of the best fashion photographers, some of the best nature photographers still insist on using film because it's got really, really fine grain. It's one of those cases where the technology went out just at the point when it had reached almost perfection. The very best color film, if you ever want to get the greatest color pictures in your life, get a hold of some old movie film. The film that was designed for making movies, what do you do with a movie film? Do you look at it like this? No. You blow it up on a huge screen. So it was designed to be enlarged, which meant that the grain was really, really fine. The colors have to be perfectly sharp, perfectly clear. And I used to buy movie film. I used to send away for 35 millimeter movie film and use it in my film camera. I got incredible pictures. Absolutely amazing. But a little more expensive than I could afford to do all the time. All right? The digital camera goes straight to print. It actually creates a file in there that's the equivalent of a print. There's no negative. There's no intermediate stage. When the scanner does, the scanner is really a camera. And you can use this camera. We have one here. It's hooked up to this computer on the end. Scanners are really good. They work really well. You can try using your digital camera as a scanner, but getting the focus right, getting the lighting right, getting everything to work perfectly can be very complicated. If you go online, you can look up, try looking up making your own scanner for your digital camera, or turning your digital camera into a scanner. You'll get some directions for how to take a basic paper box and rig it up so that it can hold your camera steady at exactly the right distance from the base. And all you need to do is figure out how to get enough light in there to get an image that's clear. All right? If you try to work with a scanner and you've got a digital print. Let's say somebody goes off and takes a holiday picture and they bring back, oh, that's a beautiful picture of a shack on the beach in the Caribbean someplace, and you want to have that picture. If you try to take it and rescan it, you're scanning a scan. You're making dots out of dots. And it doesn't work terribly well. The only way I've ever found that it really works is if I take the picture and try scanning it at 1200 dots per inch, then I'll have so many dots that I'll catch all of their dots, and then I got to do some Photoshop work to make it look normal. But it can be done. It's not impossible. So this is what happens in the camera, right? The light that's reflected off of a white surface turns the emulsion dark. The stuff that comes off a dark surface turns the emulsion white or clear. Right? And then in the dark room, you take it and you reverse the colors. You take the negative and you put it on top of photosensitive paper, and you expose it for a certain amount of time, and then you develop the paper, and that will bring out the colors there. All right? And what you'll see here are the complementary colors. So you can see the orange grass in front of Ag Hall, and that will turn purple. That's the complement, the other side of the color wheel. That's what we're talking about here. All right? So what happens here is that the Photoshop application really replicates what we used to do in the photo darkroom. Only now you don't have to turn out the lights and you don't have to work with messy chemicals. You just get to swear at a high-speed computer that's trying to grapple with 50 megapixels of information. It's an enormous amount of information. But all the stuff that we used to do, enlarge and reduce, increase and decrease contrast, adjusting the hue, color saturation, that's all the stuff that you can do. But also this stuff as well. And I'll show you some of these things. All right? So the first thing, I think I talked a little bit about this shadow and highlight thing. It's one of the simplest tools to use if you don't know what else to do. If you try fiddling around with contrast and you can't make it look any better, you can always go to adjustments, shadows, and highlights. And if you're working with this CS4, you can see they're going to look slightly different. All right? But it's the same idea. So here's an image I took a picture of all my students in China, and the only place I could pose them was out in the corridor outside the classroom. And here's Kayla, and this is the original picture that I got. I work with it in Photoshop. You pull out down shadows and highlights, and by moving these sliders back and forth, I can bring up a lot more information. All right? The amazing thing is that all of this information is there. And this has been a real revelation to me to discover how much information is there. Look at this window over here. What can you see? Maybe a couple of windows from another building, right? But it's possible by using Photoshop to bring up the whole scene of what's going on outside that window. Photoshop can actually do that. It's really quite extraordinary. All right, here's another one, adjusting, and look at how much better it is. You can see the kid's face. All right, that's the first one. And then I go to editing images. Okay. So this is called photo editing or image manipulation. You'll hear it given a bunch of different names. Please be careful doing any of these things. If you're involved in anything as an engineer where it might become the basis of a lawsuit, don't touch the image. Leave it exactly the way it came out of the camera. There are ways that an expert can tell whether or not an image has been photoshopped or not. And the last thing you want to do is to get up on the stand and testify that this was the site the way it looked the day you visited it, and to have some expert get up and say this picture's been manipulated. You don't want to do that. In the old days, we used to use the instant camera, the Polaroid camera, because you couldn't manipulate the image. There was no way of changing it. Even with film, it was possible to do some of these editing things. So just make sure for your own integrity that if the picture has any use as possible evidence in a court case, don't change anything. Leave it just the way it is. And then we'll talk some more about some of the other ethical images that come up. All right? So color correction. What happens if the color isn't what you wanted? All right? There are two basic ways of doing it. There's a third way that I think I showed you a little bit about the did I show you about using the filters, the camera filters? Yeah, the color balance and all that stuff. All right, so go to the image adjustments menu and then try clicking on auto color and see what happens. Photoshop will take a shot and see if it can fix the color for you. Many times it works well, sometimes it doesn't. You can also make an adjustment layer, and that's another way of doing it. The way these layers work is that sometimes you don't want to touch the original. You want to leave the original and you want to see what happens if you try certain kinds of an effect. So you take the original and then you make a copy of it, and the copy goes on top of it. I showed you the layers in InDesign. Same idea in Photoshop. So you put the copy on top of it and then you can play with the copy. It's called an adjustment layer. So let's say you're trying to make the whole picture lighter, or maybe you want to make just parts of the picture lighter. You might make an adjustment layer, fiddle with the adjustment layer. When you got it looking the way you want, then you can merge the two images together, or you can get rid of the bottom one altogether. Whatever makes you happy. All right? The levels histogram. We talked about this a little bit. I think what I'm going to have you do, instead of just blah, 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 I'm going to have you open up Photoshop now and pull up that picture of yourself. One of the pictures of yourself. dishwasher. That may make it better. How we doing? You having any luck? Getting your pictures? You got using your own computer. That's a clever thing to do.
Free for 30 days.
Yeah. Okay. Free for 30 days. I sent you a link to a website that claims to have 100 typefaces that you must have for free. It's up to you to decide if you're willing to spend that much money. I've become a big fan of Art Deco style typefaces this year. I don't know why, but suddenly I got very interested in Art Deco typefaces. What can I say? So you got your photo up there? All right, so let's go over here to this side. Let's take a look at adjustments and let's work our way down with these things. Try levels first and see what happens. Go to levels, and it's a color photo. And that's going to make a difference in the way the levels show up. But pull down the levels menu. Image adjustments levels. Okay, so you've got a histogram. And the ideal, if we lived in an ideal world, the ideal would be to have a nice normal distribution with our histogram. So see if you can find ways of playing around with that histogram that'll give you a more normal distribution. You can try, you should have little eyedroppers, one for black, one for white, one for gray. Forget the gray one, it's not worth it. But try the black and the white one. Put the black eyedropper on something that you consider to be really, really black, and put the white eyedropper on something you like to be really, really white, and see if it makes the picture look any different or any better. Does that help? A little bit? No? Maybe? A little bit. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can try moving the sliders. You've got 3 sliders, one for white, one for black, one for gray. You can try moving the sliders back and forth and see if it gives you better contrast, worse contrast. Okay? Okay, you push it all the way to the end, you're going to get some real funky effects. Did you see why you have to start with a good picture before you can get, yeah. Okay. How about that? No? Don't like it? Not for you? Okay, you can hit cancel. If you don't like the way you look, you can click on cancel. Did everybody get a sense? He's still waiting for this thing to come up. Okay. So what the histogram is telling you is you got a lot of darks and not. So try moving the middle one over to the right a little bit and see what happens. Did that help at all? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Don't be. No, go the other way. Go make it brighter. Go the other direction. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay. So that's levels. You can try the one below it. Try the auto levels. See what happens if you try auto levels. Click cancel and try auto levels. See how that looks. It's in this. I think they put it in the same box nowadays. It's under image adjustments. It's under levels, but there's a special button in there that just says auto. Did it change anything? No, didn't see. I see. Yeah, 12, 1.03, 255. Not much. The other thing you can try changing the output levels. And see if that makes a difference. Now this is going to be a lot more important if you go to black and white. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to cancel out of the levels right now, and then go up to image mode and make the mode grayscale. Go ahead, discard. You're going to remember. Okay, now hit levels. And now see the difference when you try to work with levels with a black and white photograph. Yeah. Okay. So you see it starts out fairly muddy looking, and as you move the sliders, you get an image that's a lot sharper and a lot clearer. Okay? So Okay, not bad, but the shirt is just blindingly white.
I know, it's
Yeah.
even.
Okay, so what you need to do is you need to grab the slider on the right, and, no, the far right, that one, pull that one over a little bit. How's that helping? Is it helping at all? No, no, no. Okay, then, once you get the hang of the levels with the black and white, cancel out of that, go under Image Adjustments, try the Shadow and Highlight one. It's further down. All right, and then where it'll say More Options or something like that, or Show More Options, click on that, and the two that you want to play with are shadows and highlights. And the default is going to have the shadows at about 35% and the highlights down around 0. You can move those around and you will see that you get quite a different picture. If you go too far with those, here, click on Show More Options. You'll see a lot more. You can get kind of a funky looking comic book kind of image that way, but you'll notice that there really is a better way of making the darks darker and the lights lighter. It's letting the computer do more. You can change, there are two sliders under the amount for shadows and highlights. One is called tone and radius. You can try moving those a little bit. If you move them too far, they don't do very much. And radius is the number of pixels that are actually affected by the changes that you make. So there you go. Now you've got a pretty sharp image with more contrast. Now save it. Click Save This, and then take a look at levels and see what happens. No, don't save the image. No, cancel that. Click OK, and then now go under Levels, Image Adjustments Levels, and see what happens to the levels. Even out any? A little better? A little bit more of a histogram?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah?
It's
Okay.
kind of each.
Yep. Oh, she got whited out. Okay. Okay. So cancel out of what are we playing with? Levels and shadow and highlights, and go under the brightness contrast. Image adjustment, brightness contrast. This is going to change the entire image, not just one part of it. And see the difference when you move the brightness and contrast sliders. It's going to make the whole image brighter, the whole image darker, increase the contrast throughout the whole thing. Sometimes that's all you really need to do. Right? You can see that? That there's sometimes when that'll work just fine for you. Try cranking up the contrast a lot and see what happens. Not bad. It actually makes the picture a lot more interesting, doesn't it? Yeah. The little button below it that says Use Legacy, it used to say Go Back. Now they call it Use Legacy. Alright. So cancel out of that now. And could you go down to image menu for a second? Try auto tone and auto contrast and see how those things work. But I think you'll have to go back to the original color picture. You know how to go back to the color picture? Okay. On the top right of the screen, you're going to see, it looks like there are 3 boxes in a row, and then right next to them there's an arrow pointing up to the top. That's the history. Look at the top of the screen, and you see a little column. You got 3 boxes in a row. Yeah. So go back to the original photograph. Okay? It's still there. It didn't go away. And now try the auto color, auto tone, auto contrast. See if you like the way the computer handles those things for you. See if you can even see a difference. I almost never use these things. I don't find that they give me much of anything. Okay? Has everybody gotten a chance to do that? Alright. If you have, go back to your original picture again, and then go under Image Adjustments, Vibrance. It should be fairly near the top. Now this vibrance thing is supposed to boost skin tones. Just skin tones. How Photoshop knows what's a person and what's a brick wall, I have no idea. But try moving this slider saturation button. Wait, don't hit saturation yet. You're going to go too fast. Okay. Yeah, try the vibrance button first and see what happens with that. Anything? A little bit, yeah. Okay. It's supposed to give a little boost to skin tones. If you go too far, you wind up looking like a comic book character, right? Then, theoretically, if you push that far enough, you're going to have to move saturation in the other direction to desaturate a little bit because it's going to be too vibrant. Like you could get arrested for wearing your shirt that bright. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So that's what the vibrance tool does. Wow, that does do to your eyes. Holy cow. It's like a zombie movie. Okay. You don't look like a zombie movie at all. All right. Well, cancel out of that. All right. Pull down the image menu one more time. And go back to adjustments, image adjustments, and try, down below there you'll see invert, posterized, threshold. Try some of those and see what happens. This is just for fun now. This is not anything you would do in the normal world. Okay? There you go. You like that? Yeah. So if you ever decide to do the devil's own yearbook, you can create yearbook images using these pictures. All right? What posterize does is it reduces the number of colors. So instead of having 256 million, it'll take it down to 10 or something like that. Yeah. Invert will show you what a camera negative image would look like. It'll invert the colors. You should save one of those and use it as a wallpaper on your home computer. It'll drive people nuts. Well, that was the day it was on fire, man. Okay. What is that? There's posterize, invert, and then gradient. Oh, you got the gradient map one. Yeah, the gradient map one lets you, and there are more. And there should be an option button over there. Yeah, look at the little tool. There's a tool thing there that lets you pick more of them. There's a whole bunch. There's color harmonies, metals. You want to be like heavy metal, man. You could, yeah, this is what you would look like if you were aluminum foil. Okay? You see how awesome this is? You see why I'm always worried about students flunking out of school? Now you're really true zombie-ish there. Right. A little bit saturated for my taste, but there you go. Oh, you like the green-orange combination, right? That's you. Okay, over here, under this little tool thing, you'll see a whole bunch of other ones that you can try. Right under here, there are a whole bunch of other gradients. There are metals, there are neutral densities, there are plants and pastels and all kinds of. You can append them. If you append them, you just add them to that little toolbox thing. You can append forever. And just go on and on and on. Yeah. So now you understand what happened in the 60s? Right? Imagine being half stoned out of your mind and having access to these colors. This is why nobody in the 60s really finished college. There you go. That's you all over. All right, what was the other one down there? There are a couple more down there under image adjustments. Select the color shadow. You can try the equalize button. The equalize button tries to make everything look the same luminosity. I never found it terribly helpful. It might be helpful if you have a picture and you've got one part of the picture that looks just perfect and the rest of the picture is overexposed or underexposed. With the equalize button, you can take the lasso tool. Up on the toolbar there, you'll see something that looks like a lasso. You can lasso part of the picture and select that picture, then hit the equalize button and tell the computer I want everything in the picture to look as good as this particular part of the picture. So you can use the lasso tool for that as well. Yeah, now everything's blown out. Okay. Selecting colors and changing colors. Yeah, now this is what you do. If you want to stay with hot fashion nowadays, you change your jacket to bright orange. You put it right in. How do you do that? Okay, I gotta remember how to do that. It's not selective color. Cancel out of that one. You want to go to adjustments, replace color. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Then you have to select the color. You have to use one of those to select the color you want to replace. I think that'll do it. I don't remember how to do this. And then you have to pick the new color. Click on image. The image button down there. No, this one over here. Okay. And then we're going to select. Oh, move the hue. Move the hue button. Yeah, move that to where you want it to be. You want it to be more purpley? So we can change your. See what you're doing? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. See that? So I took a picture of my granddaughter, and she was wearing a gray sweater, and she said, "Oh, I don't want to wear a gray sweater. I was going to wear my pink sweater." I said, "No problem." So all the pictures now have her up in a pink sweater. Okay, so how much time we got? Not very much. Go back to the original picture. Can you go back to the original picture and go under where it says filter up there. Filter. Okay? And the one I'd like you to look at is the let's go to camera raw filter. Camera raw filter. This should open up the bridge, I think. Although maybe it won't. It's not opening up the bridge. I don't think it's doing anything.
No, it's trying.
You think so?
I can't click anything up here. Yeah, there it is.
It's thinking. All right. Let it think. It's going to take a minute. Okay. Look at the bridge. All right. So this is how you fix the white balance in this picture. You see where it says white balance is shot? That's the way the picture was actually taken. Try auto. Let's see if our computer can figure out what it should have looked like. Nope, didn't do that. Didn't work. Okay. But you can tell the computer what kind of camera you used, and it can set the white balance based upon that. But you can use all of these sliders over here. You're now working in Adobe Bridge. You can use any of those sliders to just the way you use the other set, and you've got all the sliders right there in front of you. So you can pull up highlights, you can pull up shadows, you can increase the whites and the blacks. Okay? And here's the vibrance button again. It's right down there at the bottom. So these are the filters. This is the camera raw filters that you're using. Now, at the top there, you'll see a whole bunch of different icons. Not at the very top of the screen, although those are cool too. Oh, what the heck. Okay. Could you mouse over? What? Yeah, the second from the top there. It looks like, you'll see there's a little square box at the top of the screen. Little square box at the top of the screen. It's the second from the right. And it's got kind of a funky shading thing on it. And if you click on that, you will get a graduated filter. Now, how many people here know what a graduated filter is? Have you used one in photography? All right. You're going to have to draw on the screen. Oh, I wish I had opened up Photoshop. Let's see if I can do it. Okay. What you can do with that is you can drag it over the screen, and you will get a series of lines. And this is the effect of putting a filter that darkens just part of the screen, not the whole screen. So let's say, for example, that the top of the image is very, very bright and the lower part of the image is very, very dark. Like your photo here. Okay? So you can take this graduated filter tool and spread it out over here. How do you want to do this? You want to go from this part to be darker, and then we can move. I don't remember. This is terrible. I shouldn't have done this. I should never do this. I can't remember how to do it. I think it's this one. It changes the. I remember. I'm sorry. Wait, maybe it's these up here. Maybe it's these next to this. All right. I'm not doing a good job with this because it's been too long since I last did it. You can see that there's an awful lot of stuff to remember when you're doing these things. Let me very quickly open up an image. Okay, so I've got an image over here. If I want to go under filters, I'll show you some of the things here. First, you can start with the filter gallery. So the filter gallery has a whole bunch of things that you can do to images to manipulate them. It'll give you broad categories up here: artistic, brush strokes, distort. If you try these things, you should go to a part of the image where you can actually see something that hasn't already been blurred. I should pick this woman's face. Okay. So here's an image, and I can try applying the colored pencil effect to it, or the cutout effect to it, or the dry brush, or rough pastels, or sponge. And by using these sliders over here, I can do a variety of create a variety of different effects. So you've got a lot of different tools that you can use. This is what they call the crackler. This is patchwork, and I can make these bigger or smaller, deeper. Stained glass, this is what it would look like if it were a stained glass image, sort of. Okay, you can play with those. I mean, I don't really want to spend a lot of time teaching you how to use the different kinds of filters because you don't really need too many of them. The ones that are useful, there are three here that are actually quite useful. The first one is blur. When you take a digital image with a digital camera, your camera is going to do everything in its power to make sure that everything in that image is in focus. Everything. That's not a good technique for making good photos because if everything is in focus, then nothing really stands out. So the way you solve this particular problem is by adding blur as a filter. And I will show you very briefly how it's done. I need a better picture. Okay, I got a picture of two kids on the street. Everything is in focus. I will show you what you can do about that. So I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to look at the back of the image, and just about everything here is in focus. I don't want it to be in focus. So what I will do is I will use, one second. I will take this tool over here, and this is called the Quick Selection tool. There are two of them, the Magic Wand tool and the Quick Selection tool. And I will take it and I will drag it across the back of the image here, and I'll select just about everything in the back, right up to the kids' heads. I'm not going to be very careful about it because I don't care that much. But I'll take all of this stuff that's back there, and then I am going to zoom in because I really do want you to see what happens when I apply the blur tool. Excuse me. So take a look at this tile roof over here as I apply the blur filter to it. And you've got a bunch of different blurs. The one that I use most commonly is lens blur, because it's not motion. Things aren't moving. This is just a lens blur. And I'll apply it to the picture, and this is how what will happen to the picture. It's going to blur. I'm getting a preview. This will give me a more accurate preview. This will give me a faster preview. But this is the distance of the blur over here. Actually, it's this one. It's the radius. And you can see the more I pull that over, the blurrier everything gets, right? That's too blurry. It starts to look really phony. You don't want to look too phony. You just want it to look like the background is slightly blurrier than the foreground, so that the attention is really on these kids and not on the background. That's what you're trying to do. It also lets you change brightness, threshold. This is just going to, these things do things to the picture that I don't see any reason to do. I've never seen any reason for it. Noise is not only going to blur, but it's also going to make it look fuzzier and dirtier. Did you see how that worked? Was everybody able to see what happened when I added the noise here? All right. And usually I don't go for uniform, I go for Gaussian, because uniform makes it look like there's a pattern involved. So now I've got it slightly blurred and Gaussian. It looks a little rougher that way. And that's the way you can use the blur tool. There are a whole bunch of different blur tools. If you look under the filter, under the blur menu, you've got a huge number of blurs. You can play with these if you want to. There are all kinds of cool things you can do with them. You can apply this one. This is the spin or zoom. Unfortunately, neither one of these goes with a preview on this version of Photoshop. So I won't really know what happens until I go for it. Shall I go for it? You ready? You want to see these kids spin? Here they go. Okay, and they arrived from a distant planet. They walked off their spaceship. All right. So that's just some of the things that you can do with the blur tool. All right, go back to quick selection. I have a variety of other things here. There's a gallery of blurs. Here's the spin blur. Here it is. This is what I was looking for before. And you can take this and you pull it out and you can make things spin in all kinds of different directions. And this will actually help you flunk out of school much quicker, because it's really too much fun. I don't know why people would even want to use this, but I suppose there are people who do. All right. So we'll cancel out of that. Other filters, the other ones that I use, this one, sharpen. And I don't really have time today. I'll show you this one on Tuesday. Sharpening photos is kind of an art. And you have to really watch what's going on while you're trying to sharpen it. And believe it or not, the best tool for sharpening is the one that's called Unsharp Mask. What a strange name. It comes from the days of working in the darkroom. We actually masked the area that we didn't want to sharpen, and we did stuff like that. Other tools you have, there's a stylizing thing here. You can turn it into tiles. You can add a wind. If the picture looks like it was, you can go, the levels are wind, blast, and stagger. And the wind can come from the left or from the right. So there are a whole bunch of things you can do with this. So this is the wind effect in the background here. All right. Lots of different stuff you can do. blah, 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 blah. I will try to show you. Now, you can do 3D with Photoshop. I don't know if you've ever tried this before, but I can take a plain white mug on somebody's desk and put a saying on it or put a photograph on it and look like it was actually on the mug. I can take a book cover and wrap the cover around the book and it'll look just like it was part of the book. That's what the 3D effects let you do. This is dangerous stuff. Yeah, you can see that. Absolutely. All right. And then, let me see if there's any other thing here that I want you to see. Pixelation, color halftone. Color halftone is supposed to make it look like it was printed in a comic book or something like that. So, there you go. So you take that color gradient, right, that you had before, and then you click the color halftone, and you look like you got one of those really drugged out comic books that they sell nowadays for the teenagers. On to lecture assignments. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Eat lectures. And bring me candy.